Hey, what is going on, everybody? Welcome back. I am continuing my tier series at each position group. If you guys been following along with me in this lead up to the fantasy football season, you should know today I'm going to be talking about wide receivers. I've already done my quarterback and running back tiers. If you guys have not seen those videos yet, please go back and watch them. But yeah, just like all the tier videos that I've done so far, I got my wide receivers I'm willing to basically spend a draft pick listed in these tiers. They aren't exactly rankings. This isn't like a one through. I'm not sure how many wide receivers are on here. I should have counted, but this isn't like a 1 through 50 type of list. This is just basically broken into tiers as far as where I would like to draft them positioned on my roster. Now, when I do go into these tiers, they are broken down in kind of like rankings as far as like which wide receivers in those tiers I prefer over the other wide receivers. With that being said, let's go ahead and dive into today's video. My first tier of wide receivers, these are basically locked in wide receiver one tiers. I think that's self-explanatory. Basically, these are wide receivers where if I draft them, they're going right into my wide receiver one slot on my roster. And unless it's a bye week or an injury or a severe drop off in performance, which could be maybe because of their quarterback situation, or I don't really see any. It would have to be the quarterback situation. I really don't see most of these guys taking a step back in their production this year. But yeah, these wide receivers: Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, CeeDee Lamb, Malik Nabers, AJ Brown, Tyreek Hill, and Amon-Ra St. Brown. Just like in the quarterback and running back video, I do have some stats listed on here where anywhere between 2 to 4 players, I basically try to find these stats where only 2 to 4 players qualify. These are over the past 3 regular seasons since 2022. And Jamar Chase popped up all over the place when I was doing research on wide receivers this summer. Starting with Jamar Chase, he is one of 4 wide receivers that have at least 310 plus receptions. He averages over 11 and a half yards per reception and also has at least 25 receiving touchdowns in the regular season since 2022. He's also one of 4 players in the NFL with at least 15 regular season games where they finished with at least 85 receiving yards and a touchdown since 2022. He's one of 4 players that average at least 85 receiving yards per game and also have at least 25 receiving touchdowns in the regular season since 2022. This is a stat I actually found last night because I have mentioned this before in videos where I do like players that can break tackles because that'll get you that extra point or two. With that being said, Jamar Chase is one of 4 wide receivers in the NFL who have at least 1,100 yards after the catch, 25 plus receiving broken tackles, and 14 plus receiving touchdowns in the regular season since 2022. And he is one of 2 players that actually have an active streak entering the season, where with at least 7 regular season games in a row with 70 receiving yards. As far as Justin Jefferson, surprisingly only popped up in one stat, but he had that he's had dealt with an injury over the last 3 regular seasons. But if you look at the accumulation of stats, I'm not going to go into those stats. He's always like top 1 or 2. With that being said, Justin Jefferson is one of 4 players in the NFL with at least 15 regular season games where they finish with 85 plus receiving yards and a touchdown since 2022. I'll go ahead and mention this. One of my tiers I'll be speaking about here in a moment is wide receiver guys I view as wide receiver ones, but they have question marks at their quarterback position. With Justin Jefferson, technically he does have a question mark at the quarterback position with JJ McCarthy, but we've seen Justin Jefferson produce with, Joshua Dobbs, Sam Darnold last year, so many different quarterbacks underneath Kevin O'Connell calling the plays. So as long as Kevin O'Connell's calling the plays, I really not worry. I think he's a quarterback-proof wide receiver. That's why I left him in this tier. CeeDee Lamb, I think he's going to continue to produce, especially with having Dak Prescott back in the lineup. He actually popped up in a number of my stats I found. He's one of the 4 wide receivers with at least 310 receptions, averages over 11 and a half yards yards per reception and has 25 plus receiving touchdowns in the regular season since 2022. He's also one of the 4 players in the NFL with at least 15 regular season games where he's finished with at least 85 receiving yards and a touchdown in that time frame, as well as one of the 4 wide receivers that average at least 85 receiving yards per game and have at least 25 receiving touchdowns in the regular season since 2022. And that one stat I just mentioned with Chase, he's also one of those 4 wide receivers in the NFL with at least 1,100 yards after the catch, 25 plus receiving broken tackles, and 14 plus receiving touchdowns in the regular season. Malik Nabers, coming off a very strong rookie season. Obviously, since the stats I look into, that's more of over the last 3 regular seasons, it's kind of hard for players from a rookie season to break into these stats, I do find. But just like I said about Justin Jefferson, I think Malik Nabers showed last year with all those quarterbacks he played with in New York, Daniel Jones, Drew Lock, Tommy Cutlets, I think those were the 3. I don't think any other quarterbacks played for him, but it does seem like they had a lot of quarterbacks play for the Giants last year. With that being said, I think as a rookie, he showed that he is wide receiver proof. I think he's going to be getting fed a lot of targets. I think he's going to be able to turn more. I think he's going to be able to get more yards this year with Russell Wilson at quarterback, especially with those deep moon shots that Russell can still throw him the ball. A.J. Brown, number 1 wide receiver in Philadelphia, even though I like Devontae Smith as much as he is. But yeah, he did pop up in some stats. He's one of the 4 wide receivers that average at least 85 receiving yards per game and has at least 25 receiving touchdowns in regular season games since 2022. And he's also one of the 4 wide receivers that have at least 1,100 yards after the catch and 25 plus receiving broken tackles and those 14 plus receiving touchdowns in the regular season since 2022. Now, Tyreek Hill, this is an interesting situation. Obviously, we don't even know if he's going to be with Miami by the end of the year, which I think that's why I think is a benefit of him. He's able to produce with Tua. I'm not too worried. He's going to be getting fed his targets. And if he were to get traded by the trade deadline to a better situation, that's even better for you if you draft him. With that being said, he is one of the 4 wide receivers with at least 310 plus receptions, averages at least 11.5 yards per reception, and has 25 plus receiving touchdowns in the regular season since 2022. And he is also one of the 4 wide receivers that average at least 85 receiving yards per game and have at least 25 receiving touchdowns in regular season games since 2022. And then with Amon-Ra St. Brown, we will have to see how this Lions offense is going to look week in and week out without Ben Johnson calling the plays. But with that being said, he's the top target in their passing attack. He gets fed so many targets. He's kind of a PPR machine. That's another tier I'm going to talk about. But I just expect him to rack up the receptions and be productive as long as he's on the field. With that being said, to wrap him up, he is one of the 4 wide receivers in the NFL that has at least 310 plus receptions, averages over 11.5 yards per reception, and has at least 25 receiving touchdowns in the regular season since 2022. All right, that wraps up that tier. This next tier of players, these are basically younger players. Most of them, Nico Collins, I think, is in his 5th year or 4th or 5th year. But yeah, most of these guys are year 3 or year 4. I think George Pickens is in his 4th season. They're pretty young wide receivers, but these are wide receivers I can see finishing as a wide receiver 1, meaning I think they're going to finish in the either as a top 10 to top 12 wide receiver. I usually consider 12 wide receivers as I play in most 12-team leagues. But I do know people play 10-team leagues. I think these guys are capable of finishing inside the top 10 as fantasy wide receivers by the end of the regular season. That's Zay Flowers, Marvin Harrison Jr., Brian Thomas Jr., Nico Collins, and George Pickens. I'm very high on Zay Flowers. I don't want to repeat everything I said. I don't know if you guys have watched this video yet, but my first video back, one of my favorite things to do is target wide receivers entering their year 3 season. Zay Flowers is my second year 3 wide receiver behind Puka Nacua, who I'll be talking about. I went into depth about Zay Flowers. I think you guys should definitely get him out of your drafts. If you want to hear my full thoughts, go back and watch that video. Marvin Harrison Jr., I'm very still high on him. I know a lot of people kind of felt like last year was a letdown, but he actually had a pretty solid rookie wide receiver year. What was the stat? I think he had the exact same rookie stats as his dad, and I think he has something to prove to himself, especially with how Malik Neighbors and the next guy I'll talk about, Brian Thomas Jr., looked as rookie wide receivers. I think Marvin's going to put together a great year. And I would not be surprised if he finishes inside the top 10 fantasy wide receivers by the end of the year. Brian Thomas Jr. as a rookie was a top 10, 12 wide receiver in fantasy last year. I think that's possible. I just left him in this section because obviously I think there's going to be some type of impact on Travis Hunter. Does that potentially take away the top end, the top ceiling for Brian Thomas Jr. as a fantasy receiver? I don't really think so, but I left him in this tier just because you had to factor in the impact of his Travis Hunter on that offense. With that being said, the stat I talked about, Jamar Chase, he's that second player. He's one of only two players that have an active streak of at least 7 regular season games in a row with at least 70 receiving yards. Nico Collins, as long as he can stay healthy, I think he can easily propel himself back up into wide receiver 1 status inside the top 10 or 12. I'm very high on CJ Stroud having a bounce back year for the Texans as far as being more productive as far as what we saw in his rookie year. So if I believe CJ Stroud is going to be playing more closer to his rookie year than what we saw last year, then that means Nico Collins is going to get back up into that top 10, top 12 wide receivers by the end of this year. And then George Pickens, it's like, oh, you already got a second wide receiver for a team that could finish as a wide receiver 1. That can be tough for 2 wide receivers to finish inside the top 10 and 12. I do acknowledge that. But with George Pickens entering a contract year, a super talented kid, and I know he's going to be playing with the best quarterback that he has played with. I like Russell in his early years, but last year's Russell was not the old Russell, right? So Dak Prescott at this point is better than what Russell Wilson is last year. I'm not going to get into debate who's been better in their career right now in this video. With that being said, I think Dak Prescott's absolutely going to feed Dak and George all year. I think George is going to get at least 10 plus receiving touchdowns. I think he's going to go after that big contract next offseason. So I would not be surprised if he can finish as a wide receiver 1. And the great thing too is, again, this is not rankings. This is not based on ADP. This is just how I view them. So you're probably going to get George Pickens as a wide receiver 2 or 3, depending on the size of your leagues. So it's not like you're drafting him as a wide receiver 1. I'm just saying, I could see myself drafting him as a wide receiver 2 or 3, and I would not be surprised at the end of the year if he's a wide receiver 1. It's just you're getting great value on your ADP as far as where you're getting him. Moving into this next tier of players, these are guys I view as they can be wide receiver 1s, but they currently have question marks at their quarterback tier. So what do I mean by that? These are guys where I would, if I had no doubts about who's throwing them the ball, or even slight doubts about who's throwing them the ball, I probably would have talked about them in the first tier just because I think that highly of these wide receivers. But we all know that in order for your wide receiver to produce, they have to have a quarterback that can actively get him the ball and put the ball on the money for them. With that being said, starting with Garrett Wilson, Justin Fields is his quarterback. We know Justin Fields isn't the greatest passer in the world. He's more of a runner. Is that going to make the Jets offense more of a run-style offense? There's a report today about actually how bad Justin Fields has in the passing attack has looked in training camp thus far. He has been very inaccurate in training camp, so that even makes me have more doubts. Now, I do think the benefit with Garrett Wilson is there's not a lot of really great passing options for Justin Fields to throw the ball to. They played with each other at Ohio State, so I do think he's going to get fed the targets, but I still have those question marks about who's throwing him the ball. With that being said, he is one of the 4 wide receivers in the NFL who have at least 1,100 yards after the catch, 25 plus receiving broken tackles, and 14 receiving touchdowns in the regular season since 2022. Drake London, I don't have too many doubts about him. He finished as a top 10, top 12 wide receiver in fantasy last year. But where I have my doubts is we just don't know who Michael Penix Jr. is going to be quite yet. We had a small sample size last year, but we haven't seen a full 17-game schedule. What if Michael Penix gets hurt and they have to go back to Kirk Cousins? How's Kirk Cousins going to look? I still think he has the talent to finish as a wide receiver one. I'm just curious about how this situation at the quarterback is going to play out. Is Michael Penix going to deliver on his top 10 pick status? Puka Nacua and Davante Adams. Honestly, these guys should have been in the first tier I talked about. But there is a major question mark with Matthew Stafford right now with his back injury. He's an older guy that already is going to enter the season with questions with a back injury. Now, I did see that Sean McVay said if they actually had to play a regular season game this Sunday, Matthew Stafford would play. But again, he's still not practicing. He's not developing that rapport with Davante Adams. I know he's got the rapport with Puka Nacua, but he's not developing that chemistry with Davante Adams. And it's a back injury. We should know, especially with older quarterbacks, back injuries could linger into the season. So that's why they're in this tier. These guys have no problem with their talent. It's just that if I'm guaranteed Matthew Stafford's going to start all 17 games, these guys are clearly wide receiver ones in my opinion. But if I enter the season with knowing that Jimmy G might be throwing the ball, then I have my doubts. With that being said, Davante Adams is one of 4 players in the NFL with at least 15 regular season games where they finished with at least 85 plus receiving yards and a touchdown since 2022. Jackson Smith-Njigba. Love this kid. He's entering a year 3, so I love year 3 wide receivers. I would definitely be taking a shot on him, but it's Sam Darnold that's going to be throwing him the ball. Basically, the big question mark with that is how Sam Darnold going to look without KOC calling the plays for him and being in that offense and going into Seattle's offense. We don't know, but I do expect Smith-Njigba to be fed targets. Speaking of getting fed targets, DK Metcalf. He's basically the top option for Aaron Rodgers. Now, in my opinion, I think we're going to see a better Aaron Rodgers than what we saw last year, especially now that he's going to be 2 years removed from that Achilles injury. But at the end of the day, Rodgers did have his struggles at the end of the year. He's an older quarterback. Is he going to be able to stay healthy throughout the year if he has to get hurt? If he happens to get hurt, then it's going to be Mason Rudolph throwing DK Metcalf the ball. But I do think the benefit of drafting Metcalf is he's going to get fed a lot of targets, and he should at least get 10 receiving touchdowns this year. I'm not going to go into moving into this next tier. I'm not going to go into too much depth about these players. I think you guys will see these names and understand they're very solid players that should get a good flow of targets as a wide receiver 2. So what are these players? These are reliable veterans as wide receiver 2 tiers. These are guys that I'm not really looking to draft any of these guys for my wide receiver 1 on my depth chart. I'm looking for these guys as my wide receiver 2 that I can trust that they're going to get the targets and that at certain points throughout the year, they're going to give you wide receiver 1 games. I just don't know if these guys' ceiling is going to be finishing as a wide receiver 1 by the end of the year. With that being said, Mike Evans, T. Higgins, Devontae Smith, Jalen Waddle, Terry McLaurin, Cortland Sutton, DJ Moore, and Calvin Ridley. I understand why people might have some doubts about Ridley being in this list, but I think he's going to get fed a lot of targets. Not a lot of passing attack there, and it seems like him and Cam Ward have developed some chemistry during training camp as well. One other guy I will talk about really quick before I move into this next tier is obviously Terry McLaurin requested a trade. I wouldn't be too worried about that. That's basically a leverage point. We've seen so many players over the past several years. They request a trade at this point, and then they get a contract extension. With the success that the Commanders had with Jaden Daniels and Terry last year, I don't think they're going to be moving Terry McLaurin. He's going to stay on Washington, and that's why I would be able to trust him in drafting him as a wide receiver 1. And basically all these guys on this list that are like wide receiver 2s on their teams, like T. Higgins, Devontae Smith, Jalen Waddle, those guys I think are capable of being wide receiver 1s if the previous wide receivers I talked about that they're paired with were to get hurt, by the way. So yeah, I didn't want to waste too much time on those guys. I think all of them are self-explanatory as wide receiver 2s on your depth chart. Now, this next tier of players, this is mainly for half point and full PPR leagues. These are wide receivers that can be PPR machine tier. So what do I mean? These are guys I believe are absolutely going to get fed targets. They might not have a lot of yards, right? These are guys that, you see that, maybe McConkey will, possibly Downs in year 3 because he is a year 3 wide receiver I really like. But these are guys where, like, you look at the box score at the end of the day, It's like they caught 8 balls of 11 targets, but they only have like 69 yards and a touchdown, which you will gladly take in a PPR league. I do play in some leagues where we have a third wide receiver spot. So usually my strategy in those leagues where we have a third wide receiver spot is try to get that reliable wide receiver. Try to get that locked in wide receiver 1, that reliable wide receiver 2, and then my wide receiver 3 spot, or you can consider that a flex in other leagues. I want a PPR guy where I just know he might not get a huge ceiling game, but I know I can count on him getting me 5+ catches, ideally 50+ yards, and that touchdown to give me a solid outing. With that being said, it's Ladd McConkey, Josh Downs, and Khalil Shakir. I think those guys are going to be fed targets this year where you're going to see a steady flow of production. And I'm very high on Josh Downs this year. He was my number 5 wide receiver in my year 3 wide receiver video. Again, I'm going to pump that up. Please go back and watch that. Moving on to this next tier of players, these are young wide receivers with a high ceiling tier. So what does that mean? Maybe I'll talk about Jordan Addison in a moment, but these are wide receivers where I'm not really trying to draft them to be in a starting position. I would ideally draft them to be on my bench, and then if they hit their ceiling, because I think all these guys on this list could be anywhere, could be a wide receiver 1 or a wide receiver 2 on your depth chart if everything goes right for them and they hit their ceiling. So let me just run down this list. Jordan Addison I would have had on a different tier, but it actually came out today. He is going to be suspended for the first three games, so that automatically drops his value for me. He also does have the question mark with J.J. McCarthy at the quarterback position. He is dealing with Justin Jefferson that's going to be taking targets. But I am still high on Jordan Addison because he's entering year 3. I've been seeing a lot of clips of J.J. McCarthy throwing him touchdowns, by the way, which maybe answers my concerns about the quarterback spot. But because of his suspension, I just moved him down to this tier. I had him in a different tier before I recorded this, but as soon as the suspension came out this afternoon, I moved him down. Rome Odunze I'm very high on as a late round target. I think he could end up coming together if Ben Johnson can fix that offense in Chicago. He's in my top 5 wide receivers to draft late video. I'm not going to sit here and repeat everything. Please go back and watch that. And I got the pair of wide receivers in Kansas City. Xavier Worthy entering 2nd season. Rashee Rice entering his 3rd season. Rashee Rice honestly would be like in one of the upper tiers where he could potentially be a wide receiver 1, but he's also facing a suspension. I think people are thinking he can get a 6-game suspension. Considering that we just got the news on Jordan Addison, we should get the news on Rashee Rice. So that's why he's in this tier, because you're probably, whether it's Addison or Rice, you're not going to, well, we know for Addison, you're not going to have him available in your first 3 games. With Rice, I think it's going to be at least 6 games, if I remember hearing that right. But we should get some news on that soon. But he still offers a high ceiling once he's back from his suspension and back in the lineup. Obviously, Travis Hunter, guys, very high on him. He's a super uber talented kid. I think his ceiling is like a wide receiver 2 as his rookie year. I don't know if he's going to be wide receiver 1 status, especially with Brian Thomas Jr. on the team. But I think the biggest thing is the variance of snaps. Like, what's his week in and week out snap count is going to be? I think he's going to be focusing more as a wide receiver, but does his snaps on defense take away from him? Is he going to be worn out by the time we get to the fantasy playoffs? This is the first time we've ever seen anybody do this in the modern era of NFL since Deion Sanders or something like that. So yeah, that's my biggest concern. I just would be feel more better with drafting him on my bench and then maybe playing him when the matchup is right. Ted McMillan, I think, could potentially be a very strong rookie wide receiver as long as he can develop that rapport with Bryce Young in Carolina. He's going to be the number 1 wide receiver for them, and as long as he can see some consistent targets. What I do like about him, I think in his rookie season, he does have the potential to get 10+ touchdowns because of his big frame and what he can provide to them in the red zone. Very high on Matthew Golden, the rookie wide receiver for the Packers, and I'm also high on Jaden Reed, the year 3 wide receiver. The reason why I'm not trying to draft these guys as starters is they do also have plenty of wide receivers in Green Bay. I wonder who's going to be the week in and week out option, but if there's 2 wide receivers I want on my rosters from Green Bay this year, is those 2 guys, because I think the other guys, like potentially could be traded at some point. Ricky Pearsall, it can be the top passing attack option for the San Francisco 49ers this year. I'm going to talk about a guy in the next year by Brandon Ayuk. I don't think he's going to be available at the beginning of the season. Jawan Jennings is dealing with a hamstring injury, and if those guys are out to begin the beginning part of the year, I think Ricky Pearsall can be playable to start the beginning of the season. I actually talked about him in my top 5 wide receivers to target late video if you haven't watched that yet. Emeka Egbuka, the Ohio State rookie wide receiver for Tampa Bay. I think he can provide early season value when Chris Godwin is out. I don't know if he's going to be a week in and week out option, but it does sound like everything I'm hearing out of Tampa Bay's camp is they love this kid out of Ohio State. So he's a guy where I would definitely take a chance on my bench and see if he can be a week in and week out starter. And then these last 2 guys, I actually talked about in my year 3 video, Marvin Mims Jr. and Demario Douglas. I think each of them have a potential to be a wide receiver 2 at some point this season. I'm not going to go into too much depth on these next guys just because this video has already been pretty long. The running back tier videos and my wide receiver tier videos is always my longest videos at this in my preseason fantasy videos. With that being said, these are basically guys I'll be looking to draft in my bench. Bench wide receivers I think that can be startable throughout the season. I don't know if these guys are going to be week in or week out starters. I think these guys are going to be like spot starters when you have bye weeks. These guys are going to be starters when injuries happen, and then if they do prove themselves as a week in or week out option, you're just drafting them to your bench. First of all, the first 2 guys I do want to speak about, Brandon Ayuk and Chris Godwin. Both those guys should not be in this tier, but the fact is they're both hurt. They're likely not going to play at the beginning of the season. If you see that they are placed on the PUP list, or it's if they remain on the PUP list, yeah. If they are remained on the PUP list after the roster cut down date, they have to miss a minimum of 4 games. That's the first month of the schedule. So if you are in fantasy leagues and you still want to take a chance on a Brandon Ayuk and Chris Godwin to provide you like mid-season to playoff run value, check if your league allows IR spots, because then you can draft these guys, place them on your IR, and then go pick up somebody off the waivers. I would definitely consider doing that for both of them. Then just kind of going down the list, Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed, I'm staying away from the Saints passing attack, but I do think they can both provide potential value as bench options. Cooper Kupp with the Seahawks, Deebo Samuel with the Commanders, Jameson Williams, you've heard the good reports out of him in Detroit. He's got all the talent in the world, but I would rather take a shot on him on my bench than a starting spot. Stephon Diggs, I think, can provide great value for where his current ADP. Michael Pittman Jr. and Alec Pierce for the Colts, Rashad Bateman for the Ravens, Keon Coleman for the Bills, Michael Wilson for the Cardinals is a year 3 wide receiver I'm high on. Darius Slayton, for some reason, it always stays consistent. He's always a good quality bench option to have, and he can be more productive with Russell Wilson at quarterback. Quentin Johnston and Trey Harris for the Chargers, Christian Kirk and Jaden Higgins for the Texans. We'll have to see who's going to emerge as the number 1 passing attack besides Brock Bowers out there in Las Vegas, but I put the trio of wide receivers here for the Raiders: Jacoby Myers, Trey Tucker, and Dante Thornton Jr. Don't know if I really want any of the passing options for the Browns this season, but if I had to maybe take a chance on a Browns wide receiver, it would be either Jerry Jeudy or Cedric Tillman. So yeah, all those guys right there, they're basically guys I'm willing to take a chance on, stash them on my bench, see how it goes, and then if I have to replace them with a waiver wire option, they're only bench options at that point. So yeah, that is today's video. Probably definitely going to be the longest tier video. This already beat the running back video because just like running backs, there's so many wide receivers to go through. With that being said, if you enjoyed today's video, please hit the like button. If you have not subscribed to my channel on YouTube, please subscribe to my channel. Follow me on all my social media platforms, whether it's X, TikTok, or Instagram. The next video I'm going to do for you guys will be my tight end tier video. I'm actually going to be getting that for you guys. Plan on getting that out for you sometime Thursday because I got some plans with some buddies this weekend. With that being said, I'm going to hop off here. I wish you guys the best of luck in your drafts because I know they're going to be ramping up with August beginning. I'll talk to you guys soon. Peace out.